Hello students, I am Dr. Saliha Jamal, Faculty Department of Geography from Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Welcome to today's class. So I am again here with the course Climate Change, Vulnerability and Adaptation. And today's topic of discussion is resource and its type. When we say that climate change is impacting our resources and which in turn is affecting the ecosystem, the natural environment in one way or the other way, it becomes very much important to understand first what is resource, what are its types and how it is affected by the climate change. Let us start understanding what is resource. When we talk about resource, it is any material in our surroundings or in our environment that can be used to fulfill our desire, our needs, our wants, and which is economically viable and we can say culturally sustainable and technologically accessible. Means for anything to become a resource, it should be used to fulfill our needs and desires, and that resource must be economically viable, culturally sustainable, and that should be technologically accessible. Many times certain materials we say they are having potential of resources, means many times we don't have technology to access certain materials to use it as a resource. So for anything to become a resource, three things are very much important. First, it should be utilized to fulfill our needs. Second thing, it should be economically viable, culturally sustainable. And third thing, it should be technologically accessible. If we come to its one popularized definition by Zimmerman, who defines resource and says it does not relate to any actual object or substance, but rather it relates to a function that an object or substance may carry out. Means resource is not any object, but it is actually the function, the operation that particular object or substance carries out, or maybe it may be terms in terms of action that it may participate in, especially the function or an action of achieving a specific goal like meeting a need. For example, if we're talking about energy use, it has different roles, certain functions in order to achieve certain goal. Maybe it may be used to produce electricity, maybe it may be used in industrial sector or maybe in transportation sector. Means it is having different function and it achieves different goals by performing certain actions. That's why Zimmerman has defined that resource is not related to the object, but it is related to the function or an action that it plays. Resource can broadly be classified into national, international, or renewable based on its availability. Although there are various other factors on which generally the resources are classified, and we will be discussing further in our lecture. So here we say actually what does the resource play role? In role sense, it generally enhances our well-being. How it enhances our well-being? By having certain action, or we can say certain function which fulfill our needs and desires. Thus it play a very important role in enhancing our well-being. Also it increases financial gain, and it also facilitate the efficient functioning of a system. For example, you can say various resources come together, integrate together to function in an industry, maybe in aviation sector, maybe in agriculture sector, maybe in transportation sector. Means it facilitates the efficient functioning of a system. So that's why any entity that fulfills the human needs and the desire, it is regarded as conventional resource from human perspective, means that resource should always have certain purpose, it should always have certain function. Coming to the classification of the resources, types of resources, already we have said that anything that is useful to us, which fulfill our needs, enriches our life, enhances well-being, is considered as resource. So, formally, let us define that a resource is anything that is found in nature and useful to the human beings. Maybe in terms of, we say, food, water, plants, airs, or anything else, whichever has a certain function to fulfill our need, that may be regarded as a resource. The major categories of the resources are natural resource, if we say, man-made resource and human resource. We are going to discuss it one by one. You may be thinking natural resource and man-made resource are little bit clear from the word itself. But once we say man-made resource, and what is the human resource? Actually, human uses technology in order to turn any material, whether it is natural or man-made, into a resource. Without any technology, we cannot turn any material to a resource, and over time it increases the value of that material, which becomes a resource. That's why we have to talk about the human resource. So this is one of the more popularized classification of the resources, that generally the resources are all mainly categorized into two types, although we have studied here natural resource, man-made resource and human resource. But on major basis, it is categorized into two, natural and human. That is natural and human. In natural resource, we have two types of resources, renewable resources and non-renewable resources. We are going to discuss each one by one. And again, this renewable resource can be classified into two major parts, that is continuous flow, example wind, means which resources which can be received continuously, which can be attained continuously, that is known as renewable resource. In that, if we see, continuous resources are like wind, water, etc. When we talk about biological resource, we have in that two category, biological resource, vegetation and wildlife. Both are natural resources, vegetation also, wildlife also. That's why it comes under the natural category. And again, biological resources can be defined into vegetation and wildlife. Coming to the then again, when I am talking about natural resource, there are resources of non-renewable type, which cannot be renewed continuously, or which is having a stock, and once it get finished, it cannot be renewed. Either it cannot be renewed, or it may take hundreds and millions of years to renew back. So that's why they are known as non-renewable resources. In that too, we have recyclable resource and non-recyclable resource. Recyclable, which can be recycled and reused, like metals, plastics, etc. And non-recyclable, we are having the fossil fuels, which cannot be recycled and reused. Coming to the another type of resource, that is the human resource. These are mainly of two types, structure and institution, quantity and quality. We will discuss one by one. Coming to the major category, when we talk about resources, natural and human resources, natural resources are the natural assets what we have in our environment, those resources which come from the nature and which it is used with little alteration. Maybe it may be used in original form also. For example, air, water, sun energy, it may be used in original form also, or it may be used with some alteration. That's why the resources which comes from the nature, from the environment, that is known as natural resources. If we talk about example, there are n number of example you can give a student. For example, water, lakes in streams, then we have the minerals and the soils, then we have air we breathe are all common resources. Talking about, we can say, natural resources, but which are generally non-renewable, because we can say water, minerals, soils, air, these are all renewable resources. But when we talk about natural resources and also it is non-renewable type, then comes the examples with coal, petroleum. These are also natural resources, and further it can be divided into categories according to their level of development. Further, then we again have uranium. If you take an example, uranium savings are prospective resources, potential resources that are bit currently underutilized, but it may be used highly in future. That's why it is known as prospective resource. So these are the example of natural resource like fuel, energy, ore, forest, land, or biological resources. These are all what? Natural resources you can give in example. Now, coming to the types of natural resources, there are certain factors on which these types are again categorized based on the development use. These natural resources may be categorized maybe on the level of development and use, maybe on the basis of origin, maybe on the basis of distribution, etc. First category, based on the development and use, we have actual resources, potential resources. Here, when we talk about actual resources actually refers whose quantity is known to us and which are used at present. For example, coal. We can evaluate the presence of coal, what we are having, and which are being presently used. So that's why this type of resources are known as actual resource. Second type of resource is potential resources. Resources whose quantity is not known to us entirely, but which are not being used at present at particular rate, or it may be used at present in very small quantity, but it can be used in future at higher rate. So, particularly what is the basic difference? In actual resource, we know the quantity. In potential resource, the quantity is unknown to us. Second major difference is in actual resource, these are the resources which are used at present. Potential resource, it has the potential to be used in the future. So, example you can give for the actual resource, coal, petroleum. For the potential resource, you can give the best example like uranium. So, this is mostly on the basis of development and use. Coming to the another type of natural resource based on the origin. If we talk about origin, we have two types of major resources, biotic and abiotic resources. If we talk about abiotic resources, resources that are derived from non-living sources are known as abiotic resources. The word itself is signifying. Abiotic means non-living. So, resources which are obtained from the non-living sources are the abiotic resources. For example, soil, rocks, these are the abiotic resources. Coming to the biotic resources, word again itself is signifying resources which are generally obtained from the living beings are known as biotic resources. For example, forest products, we have forest. These resources belong to the biotic category, and these resources have the capacity to reproduce and regenerate themselves. Another basis for the categorization is based on the exhaustibility. Means what is its exhaustibility? Nature. On that basis, we have two major types of resources, renewable resource and non-renewable resource. We have renewable and non-renewable. If we talk about renewable resources, those get recharged, renewed back. On the other hand, it can be also said it is renewed rapidly. Means what is the rate of consumption depletion? Many times it is renewed at the same rate, that is renewed rapidly. Means two things you have to see here. Once which can be renewed, which can be recharged, regained, and the renewing capacity is rapid here. That is known as renewable resource. Why I am saying I am talking about renewing capacity and talking about the renewable resources can be renewed rapidly, because when we talk about non-renewable resources, means many times the non-renewable resources can be renewed, but the rate of, we can say, renewability is such a slow that it may take even millions of years. So in simple language, renewable resource which can be renewed and non-renewable resource which cannot be renewed, which has a restricted stock, and when the stock is depleted, they may require million of years to be restored or recharged. So just on the base of renewability, we can have renewable resources and non-renewable resources. For example, renewable resources which can be renewed rapidly and which can be recharged is sun power, wind energy, tidal energy, etc. And if we talk about non-renewable resources which take million of years to renew, or either it may be depleted when it is used, that example you can give here, coal and oil. Let us have notice here the difference between the renewable resource and non-renewable resource. When we talk about the renewable resource, we have said it can be renewed. Why it can be renewed? Because it is very much infinite in quantity present in our nature. So it is present in our nature in infinite quantity, that's why it can be renewed. But opposite to this, the non-renewable resources, once completely used, it cannot be renewed because of its limited stock. Renewable resources are sustainable in nature because it continues for a long time, and non-renewable resources are generally exhaustible in nature because once it depleted, it cannot be recharged. Renewable resources are generally low cost and we can say environment friendly, like solar energy, wind energy, and non-renewable resources are generally they have the high cost and they are not very much environment friendly. Renewable resources can be replenished quickly, and non-renewable resources which cannot replenish quickly, but it takes a long time, maybe millions of years. So these are the few of the differences between the renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Now, another basis on which the resources can be categorized is on the basis of distribution. The first category according to this is ubiquitous resource, second localized resource, third potential resource. When we talk about ubiquitous resource, actually these refer to those resources that are generally present in any part of the world. For example, air is present everywhere, water is present on this planet Earth almost everywhere. That's why these type of resources which are present everywhere in this world is known as ubiquitous resource. When we talk about localized resource, localized means the resources which are only present in some selected areas or regions of the earth, that is known as localized resource. For example, that is presence of coal, iron, presence of coal mines in Jharkhand, you can give example. So all the resources are not present everywhere. Many times they have their localized origin. For example, petroleum, natural gas, they all have the localized origin. So some factors, why they have localized origin? Because various factors influence this. Maybe the factors like climate, topography, altitude, these are more important for the distribution of certain localized resources. So talking about potential resource, actually potential resource are those which are found in the environment that are readily accessible, mainly these resources are easily accessible, but actual significance of those resource and what is the strength of particular resources have not been fully recognized by the people. So that's why they are known as potential resource, and we may say these resources have lots of potential for the future. Means they are recognized in our nature as a resource, but their importance, significance, use is not fully recognized. But still we know that these resources may play a very important role as an important resource in near future. So these resources are generally known as potential resource. For example, we can here say solar energy, wind energy, tidal energy, that we recognize these as a important resource, but still what is the strength, what is the significance of the resource, in what sector, in which way it may be utilized, that is not fully recognized. But we know that it has a lot many potential for the future. So these are mainly based on the distribution. Means ubiquitous resource that are found everywhere, localized resources which are found on some specific locations, potential resource which are identified as resource but its significance, importance and strength is not fully recognized. So these are the three major resources on the basis of distribution. Again, we can say another resource on the basis of distribution is developed resources. When we talk about developed resource which has been found and improved by the people over time, means people have recognized that this is a resource and that they have improved it over time into finer resource that it may be utilized for the various operations. For example, minerals, fuels, fossil fuels, they have n number of applications in different factors. So actually these are the developed resources that we recognize it and we improve it, and accordingly they can have many role and functions for the different purposes. Another resource we are having here is stock resources. Some of the environmental resources such as the significance of hydrogen and oxygen gases. We are taking example here. Like if we talk about the importance of hydrogen and oxygen gases, they are referred as stock resources because they have sufficient potential but are not understood enough to be used or developed. Means they are the stock resources. They are in stock, they have the potential to be used, but its use have been not understood fully. So coming to the, after having the understanding the natural resources and its categories, now here we are going to discuss about the man-made resources. Man-made resources are generally the ordinary assets that go significant transformation due to the human intervention. Means the human beings, by using certain technology, they turn some of the object, material as a resource, and then these resources play a wider role, a wider function for the certain purposes. That's why it is said that man-made resources are ordinary assets, means they are just the ordinary material that due to the significant transformation by the human being using the technology can be used for the various purposes. Man-made assets may include, for the example, models, extensions, railroads, machinery, buildings, bridges. Means machinery is playing a number of roles. Buildings are useful for various purposes, simple bridges and all. And other man-made resources created using the solar energy. Means already a recognized resource is being transformed, is being more improved, developed and refined in order to play various role, various function for the various purposes. So these are the man-made resources. Man-made resources are generally created when people use natural resources in order to create something creative that adds worth and utility to our lives. Means already identified resources are being creatively utilized by the human being to play so many roles in order to add worth and utility to our lives. For example, what are the things here which play very important role in transformation of certain material, assets or resources to more refined form are the human talents, knowledge, technology. These are things that enable the creation of man-made resources, means on the basis of human talents, what type of knowledge the human being are having. With the use of certain technology, they can create, we can create man-made resources, and generally these resources are renewable. For example, iron metal. It is one of the characteristic asset that can be produced as steel, which steel is a man-made asset that is produced from the iron. Means iron is a resource which is more transformed, more it is refined and then can produce steel, and which now steel is a man-made asset. So innovation is playing a very important role here. Technological advancement play a very important role here. Regular compounds can even occasionally only become valuable after going certain transformations, certain changes. People create human-made goods by using everyday assets. So, two things we have here understood about the natural resources and the man-made resources. Now, the third category is human resources. When we talk about the human resources, it means we are talking about ourselves. We people we are talking about, means what is the quantity of the human being, quality of the human being, how we can use our skills to create more assets, more resources for the well-being of the humanity. That's why we are known as human resources, because our quantity and quality matters a lot. We by our skill using certain technology can create more assets, can identify more resources. So we are also known as human resources. But in the unlikely event that generally we are able to create man-made assets, and every human being is itself is an asset, means we can make man-made asset, and we as an individual is also a resource. So when we have knowledge, when we have skills, when we have creativity in order to create man-made assets, and which may be by using the natural resources or certain assets from the nature, we can transform into more refined form that it should be used for various other purposes, then we ourselves here becomes as a human resource. So human beings are therefore a very special resources, because identifying the significance of any asset, material, object as a resource is particularly done by the human being. Refinement of the certain object assets as a more refined resource is generally done by the human being. That's why we are very much special resource. So here education, health contribution to people, these are all being a valuable asset as a human resource, we can say. So even we can have human asset improvement, which is the process of improving the nature of relationship building skills so that people can create more assets. So this is also one thing that is to be considered And although if we talk about the term human capital and human resources, means we generally talk about human resources, human capital, these are frequently used and interchangeably they are used. Somewhere we use human capital, somewhere we use human resources, but here human capital is a more specific concept. Similar terms even they are being used for the human resources like personals, labor, talent, manpower, etc. So these are all we can say interchangeable resource. So in this lecture students, we have understood what is resource, and then we have also understood the three major types of resources: natural resources and then its categorization in the different categories, and then man-made resources, and lastly the human resources. We will continue again more types of resources in the next lecture. So till that time, have a nice day. Thank you.